let's see. Mr. Hanlon, do you have the?
Okay, it was resolution 132, and resolution 132 approves an administrative regulation known as an AIM, and it's a sexual harassment policy.
Turn the mic on.
Okay, it's R 132, approves an AIM regulation, the city sexual harassment policy. City sexual harassment policy.
Mr. Mann,
Yes.
would you like to?
Well,
Does it run
the
down?
basic story behind it is the city has not been updated in a long time. And as you know, we have a new HR director who comes from private industry where this is a very serious matter. It is our duty as the city of Allentown to educate our employees about what the law says, have our own sexual harassment policy, so that everyone knows what they must follow. Otherwise, we have the liability. So everyone knows what they must follow. Otherwise, we have the liability. So this will require training as well as people signing off on what the policy is, so that we have proof they've been educated as to what they should not do and what they should do under the federal guidelines. So Melanie has been working on, the HR director has been working on this for a while. And this is one of those things that helps reduce our liability and educate people as how they should interact on these issues.
Are there any questions? Is that it? Do I have any questions from anyone on the committee or anybody on the panel? Mr. Zuko.
Yes, Chairman. Question, Matt probably can answer this. I know that back when I was with the police department, they didn't follow AIM regulations. So this is an AIM ordinance, or not really ordinance, but an AIM policy. How is that, in a sense, going to affect them as far as investigations go?
Yeah, for that, I'd have to, I mean, just taking a step back about the AIMs, and the AIMs were a process, and I talked with Mr. Hanlon about this at some time, where my understanding is it's been a few years since AIMs have been implemented, so the process has kind of fallen into disuse. And this is the first time it's an effort to try to get it back up and running, and the process that had been in place was one that involved city council, and which is why it's before here. So it's city council involved and offering their thoughts in shaping what the policy is going to be. As how it would impact the police officers, I don't know that I can speak on that directly. I know that the policy, like Mr. McMahon had said, is to try and it's been a long time since this is updated, is my understanding, and we're trying to, and it's an important issue, and I think HR was very concerned in wanting to move forward with this in a timely basis and get things up to speed, so to speak. But I also, I mean, not to speak for Mel, but I think she's very open in hearing any comments and concerns and adaptability to improve upon things. So it's a long-winded response to say that I don't know exactly what that would do with that.
Well, I know that they do have their own policy as a result of the blue book, that they have. So I think you would be okay in a sense that this is going to be a city-wide policy versus a department policy. So I think that maybe the word aimed or the aim approval should be taken out and it be made as a city-wide policy.
I believe AIMs are citywide policy, and in some respects, and maybe you could educate me as to why some don't apply to police officers. But when it comes to financial management and everything else, the AIMs apply to everyone. So if you're doing purchasing, if you're doing some of the other things, even, and Roger, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the police did follow AIMs.
I'll jump in. I think maybe I can short this a little bit. We have a blue book in the police department. Okay, those rules and regulations, including sexual harassment. It's the police department is accredited, so those come from accredited standards. So it probably pretty much mirrors this. It would be my guess.
I just thought as far as discipline goes, can they be disciplined twice from the city and then from the police department?
My guess would be no.
No.
Yeah, I think the answer would be, I think it would be no, but it's something we consider, a point to think about, but I probably no.
Okay, that's all I have.
No, I think it's things, as Roger pointed out, things were that are blue book, I'm sure by the contract. precedence over some of the aims that cover the same policy.
Correct, they're just mirror law policies, just call different things. I'm sure if we looked at the police department policy on sexual harassment, it would probably be pretty close to
Well,
that.
my only concern was that the city, that the police department wouldn't discipline them in a certain manner, and then they'd be subject then to discipline from the city because they're an employee of the city. That's my only thing there.
Yeah, I would doubt that would be a situation that would happen. I think it's, yeah, I don't think that would be the case.
Like, for instance, certain disciplines, the chief can suspend an employee up to 10 days. So he gets that suspension, but if it goes for a termination, that's got to then come to city council. So in a sense, can be disciplined twice. That's 10 days and then termination.
No, it's a very good concern, and
So just maybe something we can look into.
yeah, in implementing of it, I know Mel would look into that and do that for sure. Just make sure it's done appropriately.
Thanks.
Anybody else, any of my colleagues?
Yes, Madam Chair, I just have a couple questions, and Mr. McMahon, I understand if some of these are things that you might have to have Ms. Sally DeSumi get back to us on with answers. First, I think this is a very well-written policy. I think that there's a lot of things in here that are beneficial and helpful. I just have some questions on possibilities that, while more than likely they would be odds against them happening, if they did happen, they might create some issues. When we would be looking at any of the elected officials, so of our 9 elected officials, obviously termination is not an option in that particular sense under Pennsylvania state law. So if we could get a sense as to what the mode of dealing with that situation would be for any of the elected officials, I would appreciate that, because I think that should sort of be spelled out so that the employees know that if there is an issue with any of the members of council or the controller or the mayor, that there is actually some type of action that can be taken on their behalf, that it's not sort of a useless claim to make. The other thing I would ask about in that sense is also if we would still be using the HR director to conduct the investigations, or if we would look to have someone outside, because obviously it would be difficult for the HR director to conduct an investigation, say, on the mayor or even on the managing director's position, because they are technically above it. So if we could check that, I would appreciate it. I wasn't sure in section 4.8, it talks about the third party. It says the city of Allentown is committed and required by law to take action if it learns of potential sexual harassment, even if the aggrieved employee does not wish to formally file a complaint. So that's, I'm assuming that addresses with the third party reporters in that sense. And was just curious if there could be more of a flesh out as to sort of how that would have to go about. Because it's obviously something that, it's gonna be hard for a coworker to report that for a victim who doesn't want to do it, but if there's a more fleshed out policy, it might make it a little clearer. And is this going to add any type of, since the HR director is the one conducting the investigations, is this going to sort of add any additional necessary credentials to future HR directors as we move forward? Because obviously the mayor has wide latitude in picking the cabinet, and I'm just curious if we would need to have any type of certifications or special trainings for future HR directors, because I think that would be something wise for the administration and future councils to know.
Yeah, I always suspect that any future HR director either has already had this certification training, or they will get it thereafter. And to give you an example, Melanie is actually, our HR director, is actually doing the training.
Correct.
Training. She trained the trainers. Matter of fact, she trained, I think, 4 or 5 people in the police department. And those officers are now training the rest of the police department in this.
No, and you're absolutely right. I'm just looking from the standpoint of technically there is wide latitude for any administrations in the future to pick someone. So if that would be something that from a liability standpoint, the solicitor's office feels they should have that criteria, it's just perhaps something that should be kept so that future councils would know that when picking in case they didn't have that.
So you'd like to see the job description?
Excuse me.
Yes.
What kind of certification are we talking about?
No, I'm just simply asking if there is anything that would be required, Councilwoman Moda. I'm not saying that there is, I'm just asking if we can be told if there is.
is there's a certification requirement for this?
Not to my knowledge, my guess is there's a certain amount of training.
Right, and that's, I'm just trying to make sure that we know.
And honestly, most organizations have been doing sexual harassment training for probably close to 20 years.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. The other thing that I was wondering if we could get more information on is, if the employee would require termination, as to who would make that determination. Would it be a decision that the mayor would have to make? Is it a decision that would be made with the department head in consultation with the HR director or the managing director? So I'm just curious where the power for termination would come from outside of bargaining units, because obviously in those bargaining units, we know that there is criteria that you go about for termination, but for the non-bargaining.
In my opinion, and I don't know that this is stated anywhere, the ultimate authority rests with the mayor.
Okay,
And that would be in consultation with the managing director as well as HR and the solicitors in the solicitor's office.
okay. And I just have two more questions, Mr. McMahon. The first is, if there could be something in there about if the solicitor would be someone under investigation about council notification, because obviously in the charter, as we saw earlier this year, council has the authority to terminate the charter as well as the mayor. Or excuse me, terminate the solicitor, not terminate the charter. So that there might be a prep for council, or at the very least, the council president to be notified if there are any issues, simply so that if the mayor would choose not to terminate, that council would have its authority to do so if they so chose. And then the last question I have is, the third-party vendors and contractors, who is going to be conducting those investigations? Will it be the HR director? Will it be a combination of perhaps the solicitor's office or the department that deals with the vendor or contractor? And then are we looking to make sure that this is contractual? Because if we would want to terminate the contract over this, who would make that decision as well? If it was that severe that we would want to terminate?
Good question.
And then the final thing is, I just have a suggestion, which is, I think that it would be wise to expand this policy to include not just employees and elected officials, but also members of our boards, commissions, and authorities, because they have daily interaction with, not daily, they have regular interaction with our employees, and there is definitely the opportunity for harassment either from a board member to an employee, vice versa, or board member to board member. And we do sort of treat them as agents of the city, so I think it would be wise to include them in this policy as well.
Very good.
So, thank you, Mr. McMahon, thank you, Madam Chair.
Have any other questions from my colleagues? Seeing none, anybody from the public would like to comment on this? Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Tom Hahn, East Side of Allen. I would like to refresh the memory of some of council members when this discussion came up once before, and the Ethics Committee was involved as one of the people who could investigate this. And at that time, subpoena power was suggested to be used by either the lawyer that represented the council or the solicitor's office, that it eliminates any misrepresentation or lying, because if you lie and you found out and you perjure yourself, there's a penalty. So everything that you discussed so far, I'm not getting about it. I'm just saying that if you don't have subpoena power to get to the truth, all the other things are mute. So if you want to add that in with your understanding that the only way you're going to find out the truth is with subpoena power. And all we have to do is turn on the news and we find out that it helps even in what's going on in the rest of the country. So I think you should think about that and have a discussion amongst yourselves.
Thank you, Mr. Hahn. Is there anyone else?
I'm just saying, council has subpoena power anyway, so,
Say it again.
yeah,
Council using it as a-
council has subpoena power, yeah.
Anyone else? Seeing none, can I have a motion to move this forward to the council? council, full council.
I'm going to leave a motion.
And I'll second it.
Okay, so be it, move this to the full body council.
Okay.
I think that's the end of the meeting.
That's it.
I don't have it.